Okay, so, it seems like AI is just everywhere these days.
Yeah.
Like it's inescapable, right?
It is. It's
Machine learning, deep learning, and then
now generative AI. Yeah.
generative AI.
Yeah.
Like what even are all of these things?
Right.
So that's kind of what we're going to be diving into today.
Absolutely.
So we've got this transcript from this video that IBM Technology put out.
Okay.
And it's a really great overview, I think, of all of these concepts.
Mm-hmm.
And the mission for us today is to try and like untangle all of this and lay it out nice and neat for you.
Right. Map out this landscape.
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to start like right at the beginning.
Okay.
And then move through, machine learning, deep learning, and
then, yeah, arrive at all the excitement around generative AI.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, foundation models. Yeah, all the cool stuff.
All right, so let's start at the beginning.
Okay.
What is artificial intelligence?
Well, at its most basic, AI is basically the ability to have computers do things that normally require human intelligence to do.
Yeah, so the thinking part,
Yeah.
the actual like intelligence
Or
part.
core aspects of intelligence.
Right.
Like learning.
Right.
Inferring, reasoning, those things.
Yeah, the things that we take for granted
Yeah.
as humans.
Yeah, exactly.
So this is not a new idea, is it?
No, not.
AI has actually been around for a while.
Yeah, this the research goes back quite a ways.
Yeah, the transcript mentions that like the pursuit of AI really began quite a long time ago.
Yeah, it's been around for quite a while.
And it started as like a pretty niche area of research.
Yeah.
But they were laying the foundation for everything that came after.
Absolutely.
So back in the day, they were using these programming languages like Lisp and Prolog
Right.
to like start to build the very first AI.
Yeah, the foundation, the initial building blocks were laid back then. Yeah.
And it's crazy to think that like those languages are the ancestors of like really sophisticated chat bots that we have now and
it is, yeah.
like image generators.
Wild.
Right.
From those relatively basic languages.
Yeah, so that was like the really early days, and then in like the 80s and 90s, we start to see these things called expert systems, which were some of the first like real-world applications
Yeah, exactly.
of AI.
When it started to get a little more popularized.
Right.
Because those extra systems were designed to kind of emulate the decision-making of human experts in specific areas.
Right. So like if you had a problem,
Right.
you could go to this expert system and it would tell you what to do.
It would try to give you the same advice that a human expert would give you.
Right. And this was all before machine learning as we know it today.
Exactly. So this is all pre-machine learning.
Okay.
Which is important to remember.
Right. So that leads us into the next step, which is machine learning.
Right.
So how does machine learning differ from just like regular AI?
Well, machine learning is all about letting machines learn from data without explicitly programming them.
Okay.
Like step by step.
So instead of programming in every single role, you kind of just let it loose on a bunch of data and say like, figure it out.
Yeah, and they learn by example, essentially.
Yeah.
It's right there in the name, machine learning.
Right.
They're able to extract patterns from the data.
Yeah, and the video gives this example of like a sequence of circles and squares.
Yeah.
And how the algorithm can start to like recognize patterns.
Right.
Even if there are like some curveballs thrown in there.
Yeah, even with variations.
And it can start to predict what's going to come next.
Exactly. And the more data they're trained on, the more refined and accurate those predictions become.
Yeah, so it's almost like, instead of like giving it every single rule for every single scenario, you're just like, here's a bunch of data.
Right.
What do you think?
Yeah, figure it out.
Right, and it does.
Yeah.
And one of the cool things that it can do is not only predictions, but also it can like spot weird data points.
Yes, outlier detection. Yeah. That's a huge part of machine learning.
And that's super useful for things like cybersecurity.
Absolutely.
Which is something that the transcript actually called out.
Yeah.
So like imagine you've got a system that's like learned what normal activity on a network looks like.
Right.
And then suddenly there's something weird.
An anomaly.
Yeah.
That could be a sign of a security breach.
Right. So that's like super valuable.
Yeah, it's incredibly valuable to be able to spot those outliers.
Right. And the transcript said that machine learning really started to take off in the 2010s.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because some of the ideas behind machine learning have been around for longer than that.
Yeah, the mathematical concepts have been around. But it wasn't until the 2010s that we really had the computing power and the massive data sets.
Yeah, like the fuel.
Right, the fuel to actually make it work
Yeah.
and for it to be widely adopted.
So we've gone from AI, which is like the big overarching goal, to machine learning, which is like one way to get there.
Yeah.
So now let's talk about deep learning.
Okay.
Which the video describes as like a specialized type of machine learning.
Right.
So what's the difference? What makes it deep?
Well, deep learning uses what are called neural networks.
Okay.
Which are these computer models that are inspired by how our brains work.
Uh-huh.
At least as far as we understand them.
Right.
And the deep part refers to the fact that these networks have multiple layers.
Okay.
Sometimes dozens or even hundreds of layers of these interconnected processing nodes.
So like way more complex.
Yeah, much more complex.
Than just regular machine learning.
Right. And this layered structure allows the network to learn these really complex features from the data.
Okay, so it's able to make connections that like regular machine learning wouldn't be able to make.
Right. It can learn more intricate and abstract features from the data.
And the transcript mentions something that is kind of spooky.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes even the people who design these deep learning networks don't know exactly how it arrives at its conclusions.
Yeah, that's the kind of spooky part.
Yeah.
Like, it can be a bit of a black box.
Right.
Where, you feed it the data, it spits out an answer, but we don't always know exactly what happened in between.
So it was like magic.
Yeah, in a way.
Right.
Like, we know it works, but we don't always know exactly how.
Okay, so deep learning also emerged around the same time as machine learning.
Yeah, right around the 2010s.
In the 2010s, and now it forms like the basis of a lot of what we're hearing about with generative AI.
Yeah, generative AI really builds on those advancements in deep learning.
So we've gone from AI to machine learning to deep learning.
Right.
And now the hot new thing is generative AI.
Yeah, this is the really exciting stuff.
So what is generative AI?
Well, as the name suggests, it's all about generating new content.
Okay, so not just analyzing data.
Right, not just analyzing or making predictions, but actually creating something new.
Okay, and that's where we start to hear this term foundation models.
Right.
So what are foundation models?
Well, foundation models are these very large, general-purpose AI models that have been trained on massive amounts of data.
So like huge amounts of data.
Huge.
Okay.
And because of this, they can be adapted to lots of different tasks.
Okay.
Like you can fine-tune them for a specific purpose.
Okay.
And a good example of this is the large language models.
Right, LLMs.
Yeah, LLMs.
Okay.
Have you ever used like autocomplete?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Where it predicts the next word you're going to type.
Uh-huh.
Well, LLMs are like that, but on steroids.
Okay.
Instead of predicting just the next word, they can predict entire sentences, paragraphs, even whole documents.
Wow. So like a super powered autocomplete.
Yeah.
Okay, and this is what powers a lot of the generative AI stuff we're seeing now.
Exactly, like chatbots.
Right.
Content creation tools, things like that.
But there's this argument that like generative AI isn't really creative. It's just regurgitating stuff it's already seen.
Right. Some people say that.
But the transcript had this really cool analogy to music.
Oh, yeah, I like that.
Yeah, like all the musical notes already exist.
Right.
But composers can still make original music.
Right. They arrange those notes in new ways.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like generative AI is taking all this stuff it's learned and remixing it in new and interesting ways.
Yeah, exactly. It's the creative recombination that makes it interesting.
And it's not just text, right?
Oh, not at all.
There's also audio and video models.
Right. We've got audio models that can generate speech, music and video models that can create synthetic video content.
Like deepfakes.
Yeah. Deepfakes are a good example of that.
Right.
And, they can be used for good or bad, like in entertainment.
Right.
Or to help people who've lost their voice.
Yeah.
But they can also be used for deception.
Right. It's a double-edged sword.
It is.
And even chatbots fall under this umbrella.
Yeah, chatbots are a form of generative AI as well.
Right. So all of this stuff is like contributing to this huge wave of AI adoption we're seeing now.
Yeah, and I think that's what's really driving it, is the ability to create new content.
Right.
Or to synthesize information in new ways.
Yeah.
It's just much more accessible now.
Right. And it's moving so much faster.
Yeah. It's like a rocket ship.
Than it used to.
Compared to the early days of AI.
Right. It's like early AI was like perpetually just over the horizon.
Yeah. Always coming soon.
Yeah. And then machine learning and deep learning were like, okay, we're making progress.
Tangible progress.
And now generative AI is like,
right.
Boom.
Straight to the moon.
Yeah.
It just exploded.
So just to recap,
Okay.
AI is the big goal.
The overarching ambition.
Machine learning is a way to get there.
Yeah.
Deep learning is like the next level up from that.
Right.
And generative AI, the new frontier.
Yeah, that's a great summary.
Okay, good.
I think people now have a much clearer picture
Yeah, hopefully.
of how it all fits together.
So that was a really interesting deep dive into this whole world of AI.
Yeah.
But it does leave you with a lot to think about.
It does.
Like, this stuff is moving so fast.
It is.
Where is it all going?
That's the big question.
Yeah, what are the implications for society?
What kind of shifts can we expect beyond the specific applications?
Right.
What are the bigger ripple effects?
Yeah, like, we've only just scratched the surface here, so that's something to keep in mind.
Absolutely something to ponder.
Yeah. So that's it for today.
Thanks for listening.
We'll see you next time.
See you later.
Bye.